So please stay on. We are going to have a very interesting conversation today. Hello, here's our guest. Hi, Neil. Good
Hi, Jasmine.
afternoon. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
Thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
Our followers have been waiting for you, and I was just telling them that we are going to have an interesting discussion today, a very important discussion about how to stay safe online. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of us are asked to now, learn from home and do our work from home. So that means we are spending an increased amount of time online, and
Sure.
this also makes us vulnerable to some of the negative things that are online, as opposed to some of the positive things that we are trying to explore. So we're very interested in learning from you as a very renowned expert in this area as to how we can, take care of ourselves and protect ourselves, and how do we identify an online scam. So, for those of our viewers who are joining now, Neil is joining us from the United Nations Office for Drugs and Crime in Vienna, and he's the chief of UN Cyber, the UN office that works on cybercrime issues and anti-money laundering issues. So, Neil, you have one of the coolest titles in the UN, I think. Would you mind telling our followers first, like, what your job entails and what you do for the UN?
Sure. First off, thanks for letting me do this. This is my first ever Instagram live, so I'll do my best not to make a mess of it. And I've tried and got my kids tied up outside so that they don't come running into the room as well. But
Like the
let's see what
BBC
happens.
video.
Oh, I've had that already in the past week on a call where I had my 3-year-old sitting on my knee. So, yeah. I'm really lucky. I've got a really cool job, which is I'm in charge of the bit of the business that deals with cybercrime, money laundering, and the financing of terrorism. And I've got staff all around the world, some from really different skill sets. So some like me used to be cops or federal agents. Others were prosecutors. Others were diplomats for their own governments before joining us. What we do is we work principally with police and prosecutors and judges to help them investigate cyber-based crime. But the bit that I love best is when we do things like this, when we can speak to real people and explain what the bad guys and bad girls are doing and try and help people stay safe. Because doing criminal investigations is cool, helping that to happen is really cool. But if we can prevent it being needed in the first place, well, that's what it's all about.
Okay, thank you, Neil. So, in the last few days, we've collected some questions from our followers, but also if you have any questions as you're watching this live, please feel free to put them in the comment box. But one of the prevalent questions that we got, Neil, was from your experience, what online activities bring the most risk or make young people most vulnerable?
Wow.
And
Okay.
what are the types of crimes and activities young people could fall victim of?
Okay. Let's take that in reverse. So let's look at the types of crime that you could fall victim of. We're all vulnerable when we're online, right? And what we have to do is use the same level of care and the same level of suspicion that we would do in normal everyday life. If I walked up to you in the street today, Jasmine, and said, "Hey, I've got a cure for the virus," and pulled a couple of pills out of my pocket and said, "Trust me, there you go. And by the way, that's $5,000. I would hope you'd probably say no, that's not a great idea. But what we see happening right now is because I think a lot of the people are sitting at home, so our psychology changes. We're sitting in our familiar environment. We feel more relaxed. We're not in work. We don't have the usual pressures of work or school or our private life. We're sitting in the place which should be safest, and for lots of people is. I recognise that it isn't for lots of people as well. But it makes us think differently. It makes us take risk in a different way. So when we're feeling under pressure, when we're feeling under stress, when we see everything that's going on in the world around us now, that tends to make us react really quickly in taking opportunities that ordinarily we would think were dangerous. And that could be that you try and spend your money on something that doesn't exist. And I always say if it feels or sounds too good to be true, then it probably is, right? If you're getting something that is a hell of a lot cheaper than it ought to be, it probably doesn't exist. And we see this happening all the time now, and especially because of the pandemic, criminals are looking to identify new targets, new people to take money from. So you've got to be really careful in how you spend your money. We've also got to be really careful in what we believe. Because if there's something that really strikes me as this pandemic and other things around the world go on, doesn't matter how many followers you have on Instagram or on Twitter or on Facebook, doesn't make you an epidemiologist. It doesn't make what you say true. So we have to really raise our index of suspicion and challenge some of the things that we hear. Just because a celebrity says it doesn't make it true. Just because I say it doesn't make it true. So we have to test where we make our judgments from. How do we understand what we're being told, and how do we challenge some of that as well?
So what can we do in order to prevent ourselves from falling victim to all of this? Is there any way we can think already what these cyber criminals would try to do, and then take precautions to prevent ourselves first from falling victim?
Absolutely. And cybercrime, like any sort of crime, it is primarily based on profit, making money. So we've got to reduce the opportunities for the bad guys and the bad girls to try and make money from us. And that means we have to understand what they would do. So the way that we look at it within the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, we talk about cyber-dependent and cyber-enabled crime. A cyber-enabled crime is 10 years ago, if I wanted to make money from your bank account, I might have to get access to your credit card or your bank card, maybe make a copy of it illegally, and then I get your PIN number and I go from there. All I do now is send you an email pretending to be your bank and say, hey, you've been locked out of your account. Click on this link, put in your password, your mother's maiden name, your date of birth, your best friend's cat's name, and there we go. I've got control of your bank. I've got control of your bank account. I might also have total control of your computer, your tablet, your laptop, your phone. And if I do that, or a criminal does that, they get control of everything. They can see your contacts. They can see your messaging, even encrypted messages that you might send on Signal, on WhatsApp. If the criminal is in your device, then the encryption doesn't matter. They can see everything. So we've got to be really careful with anything that we get sent that has an active link in it. That could be an email. You get a hyperlink in it, and it could be on a text message, a normal SMS. It could be on WhatsApp, Viber, whatever. If you get a link in that and you weren't expecting to get it, or it seems a little bit weird, just stop for a second. There is nothing that will go wrong in this world if you don't click that button for an extra 30 seconds. And in the UN, we have to convince people of that a lot of the time, right? So if you get a link in a message or on an email, you can just hover your finger over it before you actually open it, and it will display the website that it's going to. So if I send you something now with a link and you're expecting it to link into at un.org and it goes to at neilwalsh.org, then you can start to think, well, hey, I wasn't expecting that. Might be something wrong with that. Because the criminals are trying to do this to get control of your device, which might get control of your camera, which might get control of your microphone, or to monetize your contacts and sell all of that data to other people. And I was doing work on this at 2 o'clock this morning, which was way later than I would have liked it to have been. And we see tons of criminal marketplaces where they're selling all of this stuff online. So we can prevent that by just being that little bit careful by what we click on when we get a message or an email, or even on Snapchat or any of the social messaging services.
Neil, I've heard you use these words like cybercrime, malware, sextortion, and different categories of online crime, right?
Yeah.
What are some of those categories that you have seen that young people mostly fall in trap to?
So we see now with young people, especially those who are at school and uni, who are now working at home or in their residence with a mobile or a tablet, we see an increase of sextortion. And that is sexual extortion. So we got to think about how we operate online and where we take risks and where danger comes from. And some of the risks that we see are cyberbullying, where people are generally unpleasant to each other online. We don't often see great leadership in this space from some of our world leaders, and we need to stand up and be that sort of person who behaves correctly with the right type of empathy when we're online. Because if you are trying to rely on being anonymous or having a fake profile just so you can be nasty to someone, well, that's bloody horrible, right? You wouldn't want someone doing that to you, so we don't do it to other people. We treat people online with the same type of respect that we'd expect to be treated in real life. And for me, when I was a police officer for 15 years before joining the UN, And I remember dealing with casework where we had to tell parents that their 14-year-old had committed suicide because they'd been being bullied online. They'd been called tall, small, fat, thin, stupid, smart. And that's really unpleasant. So we all have to take responsibility in how we treat people online, even if we disagree, even if they've said the stupidest thing out there that you can imagine. Well, we don't have the right to sit there and be unpleasant to them. We don't need to be. We need to be better than that. So there's the bullying aspect that we could either be a victim, but we could also be tempted to do it. And that temptation can go to everybody. In terms of risks to our devices and how we manage our privacy, some of the real risks that we see are on porn sites. Porn sites are loaded with malicious software, malware, and malware is designed to get control of your device. It mightn't be targeted at you personally. It's simply criminals who have put this code onto a website, and the moment you click on it, on a video, on a picture, or simply by going onto the site, that can give control over your computer, over your phone, over your tablet, and all of the messages and all of the private stuff that you've got online can then be literally sucked off of that device and sold online. And we see that day in, day out. So if you choose to go onto a porn website, be really careful with the links that you click on. Be really careful in what you download, if anything. And I would advise you not to download anything from there because there's massive risk to your personal data by doing that. We also we see criminals, especially now, increasing their targeting of kids and teenagers through sexual extortion. This happens in a number of ways. This can be through, you may be in a relationship with someone now and that you have decided amongst yourselves that you're going to share naked pictures of each other's, nudes, dick pics, whatever term you wish to use. You've got to think about some of the risks around that. Now, I don't come from the position of saying don't do it because we know that doesn't work, right? I remember the list of things that my parents told me not to do, and I probably ignored most of them. So what we have to do is be a little bit safer in what we do and make really critical judgments in what we do. My message to any of you, if someone has asked you to send a naked picture of yourself, firstly, think about, do you really have to do it? Really? Could you still have that conversation, that relationship without doing that? Because once the picture is out there and it's stuck on a website, it is there. Getting it taken down is really hard. We can get it taken down from some sites, but it's replicated. It goes around the internet at such a pace. It's really difficult to remove that. So it might be there for a very, very long time. And you can imagine how that might make you feel, how you might feel stressed or distressed or really uncomfortable if that was the case. You can also imagine how people might try and extort you, put you under pressure to make you do things if they've got an intimate or a private photo of you. So where we see that happening is if someone has control of a naked or a semi-naked or a sexualized picture or video of you, you might get contact from that person saying, if you don't do this, we're going to share that with somebody else. We're going to share it with your Facebook contacts, with your parents, with your family, online, wherever. And that's the extortion aspect of it. And we see this happening an enormous amount. It happens to kids, happens to late teens, it happens to people in their 20s, happens to people in their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, their 60s. And this is because we take risks. We trust more when we're online than we do in real life. If someone came up to you in the street now and say, hi, we've not met before, take your top off and I'll take a picture, you might think, no, I don't fancy that. No. But we see those risks happening online day in, day out. So first off, make the decision, do you really need to do this? If you do choose to do this within a trusting partnership where you trust each other, then if that partnership, that relationship breaks down, do the right thing. Delete them. Delete them permanently from your device. Don't take the risk of losing control of it, and certainly don't try to use that leverage that you might have on the other person. Don't be that person. If you feel that you're being pressurized to do this, and it can get into some really dangerous spaces where you are being threatened that if you don't do anything, please reach out for help. There are lots of resources around the world in lots of countries in policing, in charities, and non-governmental organizations where you can get help. You will be believed. And there are resources out there that can help you to find that.
Just on that, Neil, that was going to be my next question. So unfortunately, if someone, say a young person, has fallen victim already, what is the first thing they should do?
Yeah. Okay. First off is I want you to understand if this is you and it's happened to you, this is not your fault. Okay? This is not your fault. Someone has done this to you. You don't need to feel shame by it. You don't need to feel guilt from it. This is not your fault, and there are people who can help you. The ideal is to seek help from policing and law enforcement, but I recognise that some of us watching online today may not trust the police in the country that they live in. So we need to look out for other options, and there are lots of resources out there. What I can do maybe after we're done, and we can do this on Instagram and on Twitter and some of the other feeds, is we can put some links up, and maybe on the website of the UN, where we can get some links where people can take their time, look at this. And there's a really nice resource from Australia. There's a lady I know very well there called Julian Grant, and she is Australia's e-safety commissioner. And on the e-safety commissioner website of Australia, there's loads of resources for young people, for kids, for parents, for teachers, and how to deal with all of these risks. So I'll share that link after we're done here on the United Nations Vienna feed, on my feed, and on yours, and then on the websites as well. But it's about getting help straight away and not being forced into doing something else. If someone is trying to make you do something there and then and threatening you, then you need to get help from the police. Another message to those who, if you're on the internet anywhere, if you're on a porn site, if you find pictures of people who are clearly under the age of 18, that content is illegal. Okay? If you take a picture as a kid, and when I say child, I mean legally a child under 18, if you take that picture and you put it online, you are very likely committing an offence yourself, and you don't want to be in that space of having the police come crashing through your door and saying, I'm arresting you for a sexual offence, a child sexual offence, because that sticks with you for the rest of your life. So we don't want to be in that space. If you do find sexual imagery, so I'm talking about naked, nearly naked, could be sex, it could be masturbation, it could be anything like that on a website, and they look like they're under 18, you can do something about it, and you can remain anonymous. There are reporting portals around the world through an organisation called In Hope, so IN Hope altogether. And again, I'll post the links for this when we're done. And on those portals, and they're in lots of different countries, you can report the website or the news group or whatever feed you got that image from. And they will usually be able to get that taken down very, very swiftly, often within an hour or two. And that helps us to minimise the risk to the people who have been victimised in this, and to try and safeguard children who have been placed in that position. You don't have to give your name, you don't have to give any details whatsoever. It's entirely anonymous if you want it to be, and you don't have to get the police involved. These are choices for you to make. But I say to all of you, there is the ability to find child abuse material online is really, sadly, very, very easy still. It takes a couple of clicks. And there are some of the more popular porn sites around the world don't do age verification, which is a disgrace. So if you find stuff like that, please do something about it, report it, because you can be part of that solution.
Yes, I think that's a very important message to all our followers. It's not only important to protect yourself, but also be a whistleblowers. And if you see these things, to report them. And as Neil said, you can do it anonymously. So that is also one of your civic duties. Yep. As a young person. So Neil, with that, I'm going to the questions that our followers are sending on this feed.
Be gentle.
One of the most prominent questions was, and I'm going to quote this one from Virendra. Misinformation is spreading like never before on the internet. Sometimes this can influence not only us, but also news and even economies. What are the consequences of amplifying misinformation?
What a great question. I'm glad we started with the easy ones. So, what are the consequences of amplifying misinformation? They can be from minuscule to world-changing. All right? So this is where we all have to really treat with suspicion things that don't feel right, that don't seem to come from a credible resource. If you're getting information that's come from a friend's cousin's granddad's best friend's mate down at gym who heard it from somebody else on the bus on the way to the plane to get the airport, that might not be true. Okay, so we have to test the things that we get. As a cop, I had to test evidence. Journalists have to test their sources and their evidence to understand where it came from. How do we verify this? So at a very low level, we could just end up spreading misinformation amongst ourselves, within our community, within our family, where people then start to make choices based on that, that might make them do things that they wouldn't ordinarily want to do. And just to be clear, when I talk about misinformation, we're talking about information that is wrong, but you're sharing it genuinely. You're not doing it with any malice. You don't mean to be intentionally sharing false information. Disinformation is when we share stuff knowing it to be false and to try and achieve some sort of covert or overt impact from that. So misinformation just between friends and family can change how we treat each other, how we believe our world to evolve, how we get a sense of what's right and wrong even. We've seen misinformation about the COVID-19 pandemic. We've seen accusations on people of ethnicity, of lots of things that we simply have to ignore. And if you're reading something and you start to think, well, that doesn't feel right, then you can get involved. You can actually start researching this. Look at credible resources, verified resources if you're using Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Go through credible scientific resources because that's where the answers are coming from. We will all have a view. We will all have an opinion. Just because I have an opinion on something certainly doesn't make it right. And Mrs. Walsh reminds me of that very often. So we have to be really careful in how we make our judgments. At the worst end of this, we can have very senior officials. It could be a head of state. It could be someone with some sort of command in a village, a town, a city, a country, who is taking this and then making a judgment on what they're going to do to react to this misinformation. They could take a judgment that impacts our safety, our security, our human rights, our freedom of speech, our privacy. It could impact on how military is deployed, how policing is used. There is a whole heap of things that can go horribly wrong if we don't verify the sources and what we're seeking to achieve and what we're seeking to understand.
Thank you, Neil. That was very informative. The next question is, okay, I'm going to couple two questions together because I think they go kind of hand in hand. Praveen is asking, how can I know if someone is spying on me? And Elon is saying that they are always paranoid that the cameras of their devices might be always on and that somebody might be looking into, their private lives. So how can you identify if somebody is spying on you?
Okay, let's do the camera first. Really easy. Get a bit of tape, stick it over the camera. That's what I do. I'm sitting in my daughter's bedroom. That is my new office for the past month. And I've got 2 laptops and 2 screens in front of me, and there's 3 cameras on different things. And they've all got a bit of tape over them. The same for my phone that I'm using now. There was a bit of tape over the camera until we started talking. Take it off, put it back on. Simple. Cover the camera. In terms of spying on you, well, first off, there are not many people will be spied on, okay? I hate to say it, we're probably not that interesting, all right? So, whilst we all might like to think we're being spied on, we're probably not. But if you genuinely think this has happened, actually, the likelihood of a compromise of your device is less likely from spying. It's from you've got some sort of malware or virus on the device. So first off, if you think there is something with your device, you have to think, why might that be the case? If there is someone watching you, and a really nice way, which isn't foolproof, but it gives you a good sense of your computer or your phone or your laptop. If you suddenly find your device getting really hot and you're not using it for anything, then it's doing something. Okay? If it has a good signal strength either on Wi-Fi or your cell network, but the thing is still getting really hot apart from if you're doing an Instagram live, then there is something happening. The memory is working, the device is working. So you want to start understanding what that is. On all devices, there will be something on the settings that you can go into and have a look at the battery. Look at which apps are using your battery and draining your battery. It might simply be that you're sitting there with Bluetooth turned on, and my message, if you've got Bluetooth turned on, if you're not using a device connected with Bluetooth, turn it off. It's a leaky sieve. It just sprays information of your device out of the phone. If you're not using the Wi-Fi, turn it off. All of this stuff drains the battery. And then you can understand which apps are being used. And if you see things that don't make sense, or it's an app that you never put on, then you can take that off, you can delete it. You can look at the microphone and camera settings on your device. Look at what you have given permission to, right? None of us read the terms and conditions when we download stuff. Don't tell me you do. I know you don't. None of us do. We click yes because we want something for free. So have a look at what you've given permission to. There's an app here in Vienna where I live on the times of the next underground metro train. When you download the app, the very first thing it says is, this app would like access to your contacts. No, bugger off. You're telling me the train time. Why do you need my contacts? And that's because it's being monetized. It's selling your contacts. So if an app says, we need your contacts, we need your camera, we need your microphone, if it is not something that you are speaking to people on, like WhatsApp, Viber, Skype, whatever, then it doesn't need your microphone. It doesn't need your camera.
All right.
Also, look at your geolocation. Is your phone blasting out the exact location of where you are? If you are not lost, I would say turn the geolocation off, because you might want some targeted content from apps or providers. Okay, I get that. But when you've got the geolocation on, that is sending a message to every app that you've got on your phone, even running in the background. And that is then targeting you for advertisements. It is building up a profile of you, your lifestyle, what you like. Our phones have become our conscience. They know everything about us. They're in our pockets 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with a microphone, a camera, geolocation. It knows what you like. It knows what you hate. It knows your favorite music. It knows what turns you on, turns you off, what you spend your money on, what secrets that you don't want anybody to know. So you can limit all of these risks yourself just by going through the privacy options on your device. And the last one is, if you think someone genuinely is spying on your phone and you want to clean it, if you think there's some malware or virus on your phone, if you do a hard factory reset of your phone or your laptop, that will get rid of 99% of the nastiness that's out there. It won't defeat some of the really challenging government stuff, but I would hope that for all of us on this call today that the governments aren't that interested in us. So a hard factory reset, okay, you're going to lose your photos if you haven't backed them up. So, but doing that, you can be pretty damn sure that you've got rid of most of the risk on your device if you do a hard reset and delete everything and start over again.
Thank you, Neil. I hope that you guys took note of some of those very practical tips that Neil shared. So the next question is from Singh Prateet. Says, greetings from India. I'm a child rights activist, and I often wonder what are some gray zones that investigators face in cases of cybercrimes.
What are the grey zones that we face or that investigators face? I guess if I think of some of them really challenging investigations that I used to command when I was a cop, some of it was we had to make some really difficult decisions, often with very, very little knowledge. And these are the sorts of decisions that police officers and intelligence officers and government and diplomats have to make every day. You've got a very small amount of information and you have to make a judgment. And sometimes those decisions that investigators on cyber cases are making, you're making it not knowing where a suspect is based, you're not knowing where a victim is based. I remember having to make a decision where a really difficult case where a baby was being sexually tortured online for payment every day on a live streaming site. And I didn't know which country the child was based in. And I had to consider that if I took one course of action, it might lose any option of recovering that child. We might lose all contact. Whereas if I did another course, it might mean that that abuse continued until we could locate them. And those are the sorts of really difficult choices that we're faced with day in, day out. There is no one size fits all to this. It depends on the investigative capability of the police and prosecutors in your country, in your state, in your town. We've done a lot of work supporting India in its investigative capability, especially in Kerala, and you've got some really good skill set over there, some really good NGOs and reporting hotlines for child abuse material that the Internet Watch Foundation have put up. So tons of options out there.
Thank you. So Nunes Jai is asking, what are some of the indicators that you are countering cybercrime online?
Very good question. So let's imagine you get an email. We all get emails that are clearly spam, okay? Clearly total and utter nonsense, delete it, forget about it. But there's a lot of stuff still gets through filters. And I would tend to suggest if you get an email that starts, hello, my darling, I'm a princess or a prince of, they're probably not. If you have won the lottery and you've not played the lottery, don't click on anything. If you are starting to get loads of emails offering you things that you've never applied for, offering you access to bargains, don't go for it. Cybercrime works because the girls and guys behind it are operating off a profit margin. They expect to make a profit somewhere. And if they have hired a thing called a botnet, a robotic network, or a spam bot, or a robot that sends out all spam emails, if they send 1 million emails and they get 10 clicks back and make $1,000 off each, They're quids in. They've made a fortune out of that. So they expect that most of it doesn't work. And unfortunately, it's our human frailty that allows us to fall for these things sometimes. We would normally think, that's clearly not true. I'm not doing that. But there's that little bit in your head that says, yeah, go on. It'll be fine. You're going to get something like for a tenth of the price. And I used to see casework like this all the time where people had bought, really expensive car online on eBay or something. And then they were getting it for like $2,000 instead of $200,000. And they were being asked to pay via Western Union or PayPal or by a cryptocurrency transfer. Stuff that doesn't make sense. Things, the way the world does not happen. If you see things happening outside of whatever the norm is in your country, that's your alarm bell going off that something is not right. Trust that tingling sensation in your chest, that alarm bell ringing just behind your right ear, because it's telling you, don't do this. So it's often fraud-based. It is financial-based. If it is the sexual side, it might be grooming, where someone is trying to get access to you, convince you that they are a friend, that they are trusted. And especially in criminality generally, but in sexual crime, there is an element of secrecy. Someone will be telling you, this is secret between us. You cannot tell somebody else because this consequence will happen. If you feel that, or you get someone telling you that, run away. Get out of that situation, seek help, because that is not how normal relationships work. Relationships are not built on secrecy, they are built on trust. And if someone tries to tell you otherwise, and the way we see sex offenders, pedophiles, child sexual abusers working is that they will target kids and young people. They won't necessarily do it on Instagram, although they might. They might do it on a gaming platform and on live gaming. And you could be sitting there playing Fortnite and you're sitting talking to someone or getting a message on the screen and you think, well, I know who that person is. We've spoken before. I recognize their handle. And it builds up over a period of days and weeks and suddenly the chat goes from being on the screen to being in your ear. Goes from being in your ear to being on a video. And suddenly you realize the child, the friend of your age who you were talking to is an adult. And that they're asking you to do something or you've already done something and they're now trying to put you under pressure to do it again. So all of this it's about being alert to being online, having the same level of safety awareness that you would have walking down the street and applying that when you're online. Being online is no safer and in many ways no more dangerous than being outside. We just have to switch on a little bit and think about some of the risks that we're trying to deal with.
Yes, thank you, Neil. Okay, so this is a question from me. So you have cyber criminals, and then there's also trolls on, like, say, social media, right? So I was trying to organize this webinar with WHO and UNICEF on mental health, and we were doing a trial run on Zoom. And we suddenly got attacked by an army of trolls who were also sharing like abusive content and all. Yeah. But luckily it was a trial, so we managed to disable the interactive function to the actual event. But obviously that prevented us from engaging with thousands of young people who actually joined the webinar just because we were scared to open up the comment box that the trolls will come and spam the whole thing and even post abusive content. So how do you also consider trolls as cyber criminals? What are some of the ways that we can sort of control troll activity in our online work?
So if it's if it's just coming at you personally through your social media accounts, if you see something that you don't like, block it. Simple as that, right? No one's going to get upset. You might jump up and down and be vitriolic and unpleasant. Block them. You don't have to see that. We wouldn't put up with this in real life. If you had 20 people walk through your door and call you small, tall, fat, thin, whatever. So, block them. First off, just get rid of that. You don't need that stress or nastiness in your life. In terms of, and I think maybe you and I ought to have a conversation about that, because that's about that. If you are hosting something like a webinar, put a password on it, first off. That limits the ability of just random attacks from robotic capability that might be. It could be a state doing it, could be a nation state or criminals operating on behalf of a state doing it. We know they do that. Without doubt, there will be people who do this for a living watching us now. And my message to them is, that's not very cool. All right, look yourself in the mirror and take a good look at what your chosen career path is, if that's what you think is a good thing to do. So we can put some protective measures in place simply by having passwords on the accounts and the platform that we use. We've seen it happen. We've seen defacement of websites where We've seen the WHO were targeted, and we've seen the UN websites targeted. It's sadly, it's one of those things that will happen, but we have enough methods in place to deal with it quite rapidly if that's the case. And I think what's important is those of you who have taken the time to watch today, most of you are doing this because you care and you want to do the right thing and you understand the sort of person that Jay Afma is. You sort of understand where the UN comes from. We are there to do our best to try and make all of our lives better. And if you see crap like that, just ignore it, right?
Yeah. Well, thanks, Neil. I think this is going to be our last question, and this is asked by the Element. So I don't even know if that is a real person or not.
Come on, use your real name and a face. Come on.
Speaking of trolls. But I think the question is interesting. So basically, they're asking, we've heard of the dark web, which is very hard to penetrate. And what is the UN done? What have you done to reciprocate this situation?
So there is sometimes a perception that the Darknet is difficult to deal with. The Darknet, for those of you who don't know it, is simply an encrypted browser that allows you to have access to different sites. It was originally set up for good. It was to enable people who were operating and living in really difficult countries where there's no freedom of speech, where there's a lot of government overreach, where there's not a lot of human rights, to be able to communicate without being spied upon. It's gone down a rather different path, and like anything, everything can be dual use, okay? I could be drinking from this can of Coke, but if someone comes and bashes me over the head with it, it's being used for a different purpose. And it's the same with the Darknet. It was set up for good, but now it's often being used for bad. There are sites that sell drugs, guns, weapons, people, organs. We deal with a lot of criminality where there is the live streaming sexual abuse, torture and rape of pre-verbal infants for payment. And there's a lot of it. It's not one or two, there's a lot of it. So this exists and it's encrypted. It's encrypted end to end. So if we were broadcasting now on the Darknet, that would mean that the connection from my phone going to the Wi-Fi in my house is encrypted. It then bounces from my Wi-Fi and the internet service provider around maybe 8 or 10 different countries, getting a different layer of encryption added each time before it eventually reaches you and gets decrypted. The envelope gets opened in front of you. But all you can see is the last country that my internet traffic emerged from, not where I'm physically based. So for an investigator, some of the digital forensic evidence that we try to gather there is difficult. But my message to anybody who is a criminal or operating on the Darknet and doing badness on there, I can guarantee you that some of the people, some of the criminals that you think you're talking to are cops or intelligence officers or the military. And you will never know, absolutely never know, whether you're dealing with a cop or dealing with a like-minded criminal. And I come from the position of having done that as a cop. So you might think you're safe because of encryption, but have a look at the stories that have been in the news over the past couple of years of the biggest Darknet markets in the world getting taken down. The people who were the administrators getting arrested and being brought to justice. There is a fallacy that because encryption is involved on the Darknet or even on other chats, that you're safe. It's not the case, okay? There is a lot of good capability out there to investigate, and even if the technical bits are hard, if you have to speak or engage with somebody else, either face-to-face or through a chat, you got no idea who you're dealing with. So before you start doing stuff, just take that moment, reassess your life and think, is this the path that I want to go down? My appeal to you, if you have the skill set to build and run your own Darknet marketplaces and you think you know all about that, turn that for good. Do the good stuff, right? Become a cop. Become an intelligence officer. Become a tech entrepreneur. Do something really good with that. Don't get criminalized. Don't get stuck in a trap that is going to be really difficult for you to get out of, because there is so much skill set out there. We have seen kids around the world in different countries getting arrested because they've undertaken to attack a country, try and take a country offline, try and hack the CIA. It ain't worth it, all right? If you know you're good enough to do that, you don't have to go and try and prove it and then end up having the police coming crashing through your door at 3 o'clock in the morning. Just imagine what a bad day out that's going to be when you try and explain that to your parents, your friends, your loved ones. Yeah, why did you try and attack an intelligence agency in a foreign country? Oh, don't know, just felt like it. Wanted to show that I was good. There's different ways to show how cool you are and how good you are, so do the good stuff.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nia. You have certainly shared a lot of information with us. I've learned a lot. I've taken notes as well. Not just the information that we got from you and the insight, but also I think all of us feel a little bit safer knowing that you, your team, your colleagues around the world, and all the investigators and cops around the world are working on this around the clock to make sure that we are all safe. So thank you so much for the work that you do as well. And thanks very much for your time. And I really hope that we can do this again and educate and share our experiences with all the young people that are following us on Instagram. So thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. My pleasure.
Stay safe.
Take care. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. I hope that you learned new things and that Neil's experience and insights help you resolve some of the questions that you had. I tried to answer most of the questions that came in, but if you have any more questions, you can certainly send them to me either on Instagram or on the email youthonvoy@un.org, and we'll make sure that we get the answers from Neil and send it back to you or put you directly in touch with them so that you can talk to UNODC and Neil's team. So again, thank you so much. And as Neil said, you might feel like this issue is too big and you can't do anything about it. But every individual has a role to play. So if you see something, say something, do something, and make sure that you take care of yourself, you protect yourself, but also you play a role in protecting others as well. Thank you so much for joining, and stay safe, stay healthy.